Most people get a toast on their 30th birthday. I got a public execution, standing before 50 of our closest friends and family. My father cleared his throat and announced they were disowning me. They expected the tears, the scene, the unstable daughter they had spent decades inventing. But I didn't cry. I grabbed the microphone, looked my mother in the eye, and decided to tell the room exactly what their perfect reputation was actually worth. The invitation to my 30th birthday party was thick cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, a design choice I had debated for 3 weeks before finally approving. It felt like an indulgence, perhaps even a vanity, but I wanted the night to be perfect. I wanted to mark a line in the sand, for the first time in my life. I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I had a position as a senior strategist at Lark & Finch Media Group that I had earned through 60-hour weeks and skipped vacations. I had a rent-controlled apartment in the city that was finely decorated with furniture I had bought, not inherited or scavenged. I had Tessa, my best friend since the turbulent days of high school, and I had a sense of peace that had taken me a decade to cultivate. The venue, the harbor room, sat on the edge of Harbor Glen, overlooking the water where the ferries cut slow, glowing paths through the dark. It was upscale but warm, with exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs strung from the rafters like caught fireflies. I had paid for everything myself: the open bar, the jazz trio playing soft standards in the corner, the past hors d'oeuvres that circulated on silver trays. I checked my reflection in the darkened window of the private dining room. My dress was emerald green, silk, and tailored to within an inch of its life. I looked like a woman who had her act together. I looked like a Collins, but the kind of Collins I wanted to be: solvent, independent, and sane. Tessa appeared at my elbow, handing me a glass of champagne. "You look nervous," she said. "You should stop. Everyone here loves you." I took a sip, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. "I am not nervous," I lied. "I just want them to have a good time. Your parents are going to behave," Tessa said, reading my mind as she always did. Gordon and Elise would not miss a chance to be seen at a gathering like this. It is prime networking. That was exactly what I was afraid of. My relationship with my parents was a delicate ecosystem. For years, I had been the difficult one, the sensitive one, the daughter who felt things too deeply and reacted too loudly. They had curated a narrative around me that I was fragile, a cracked porcelain doll that needed to be managed. But lately, things had been quiet, civil. I had hoped that my 30th birthday would be the moment they finally looked at me and saw an equal, an adult. They were late, of course. The clock on the wall ticked past 7:30, then 8. The dinner service was being held back. Guests were glancing at the door. I circulated the room, laughing too loudly at jokes I did not hear, apologizing for the delay without drawing attention to it. Then the double doors swung open. Gordon and Elise Collins did not just enter a room, they annexed it. My father was wearing a tuxedo, despite the invitation specifying cocktail attire. He looked like a senator in a campaign ad, silver hair perfectly coiffed, his smile wide but stopping entirely before it reached his eyes. My mother drifted beside him in a pearl gray gown that cost more than my car, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. They brought the air of the outside world in with them. A chill that seemed to settle over the conversation. "Madeline," my father boomed, his voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. He opened his arms, but he did not move toward me. He waited for me to come to him. It was a power move I had seen him pull on junior associates and waitstaff for 20 years. I walked over, my heels clicking on the hardwood, conscious of 50 pairs of eyes watching the reunion. "Happy birthday, darling," my mother said. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, but her lips never touched my skin. It was an air kiss, executed with surgical precision. When she pulled back, she looked over my shoulder, scanning the room. She would not meet my eyes. "We have a surprise," my father announced. Turning his back to me to address the room, he clapped his hands, silencing the jazz trio. "Everyone, Please, gather round. We have a presentation. I felt a prickle of unease at the base of my neck. A presentation? This was a birthday dinner, not a board meeting. Dad, I said, keeping my voice low, we can just do a toast. The food is ready to be served. Nonsense, he said, not looking at me. This is important. Madeline, we need to set the record straight. He signaled to the venue manager, a young man named David, whom I had been coordinating with for months. David looked uncomfortable, but handed my father the wireless microphone. My father stepped onto the small riser where the band had been playing. He tapped the microphone twice. Thump, thump. Thank you all for coming, Gordon said. His voice was rich, practiced. It was the voice he used to close deals and charm investors. It is wonderful to see so many familiar faces here. Friends, family, colleagues. He gestured to the crowd. I stood off to the side, freezing. Something was wrong. My mother was standing by the entrance to the kitchen. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her, staring at the floor. Madeline turned 30 today. Gordon continued, 30 years. It is a milestone. A time for reflection. A time to take stock of where we have been and where we are going. He paused, letting the silence build. We have always tried to be supportive parents. We have given everything we could. Education, opportunities, a safety net that, frankly, has been stretched to its breaking point more times than I care to count. The room shifted. I saw my boss, Marcus, frown slightly. Tessa took a step forward, her face hardening. But there comes a time, Gordon said, his voice dropping an octave to convey grave, sorrowful reluctance. When love means saying enough, we value integrity in this family. We value gratitude, and unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we have seen a pattern of choices from our daughter that we can no longer endorse. The air left the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird. We are not doing this to be cruel, he said, and for a second, he sounded almost convincing. He sounded like a heartbroken father. We are doing this because we have a moral obligation. We cannot stand by and watch our name be attached to instability and deceit. So, we are here to announce, formally, in front of the community that matters to us, that we are disowning Madeline. The word hung in the air. Disowning. It felt archaic, melodramatic, and yet, spoken in his confident baritone, it sounded like a legal decree. We are cutting financial ties, he continued, gaining speed now, and we are distancing ourselves socially. We hope she finds the help she needs, but the Collins family can no longer be a shield for her behavior. He lowered the microphone, looking somber. He looked like a man who had just put down a beloved but rabid dog. The silence was absolute. It was thick and heavy, pressing down on my shoulders. I looked at the faces of my friends, my coworkers. They looked horrified, confused. Some looked at me with pity. Others looked away, embarrassed to be witnessing this. Tessa started to stand up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She looked ready to charge the stage. I lifted a hand, signaling her to stop. Stay seated, I mouthed. A strange sensation washed over me. It was not the panic I would have felt at 20. It was not the explosive anger I would have felt at 25. It was a cold, crystalline clarity. I looked at my father. He was watching me, waiting for the outburst. He was waiting for me to cry, to scream, to beg. He wanted the scene. He needed the scene to validate his story. If I screamed, I was unstable. If I cried, I was weak. If I attacked him, I was dangerous. He had built a trap, and he was waiting for me to step into it. I took a breath. I felt the floor beneath my heels. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I walked up the steps to the riser. My father looked surprised when I approached him. He held the microphone tight, but I reached out, my hand steady, and took it from his grip. He was so shocked by my calmness that he let go. I turned to the room. The spotlight blinded me for a second, but I found my mark. I looked at David, the venue manager, who was hovering near the soundboard, looking terrified. David, I said. My voice was steady. Do not cut the feed. I want you to keep recording on the house system, for security purposes. David nodded, his eyes wide. I turned back to the guests. I did not look at my parents. I looked at the people I had invited. I am not going to argue about feelings tonight. I said, feelings are messy. They are easy to manipulate. My father has just told you a very compelling story about a troubled daughter and her long-suffering parents. It is a good story. He tells it well. I paused, but I prefer facts. And since we are all here, I think we should look at a few of them. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. My hands were not shaking. I was vibrating with adrenaline, but it was focused, sharp. My parents insisted on seeing the guest list for tonight 2 weeks ago. I said, they told me it was to ensure the right people were present. They wanted to make sure my boss was here. They wanted to make sure my extended family was here. I thought they were being controlling, but now I understand. I turned to look at Gordon. He had taken a step back, his brow furrowed. You curated the audience for this, Dad. I said, you wanted maximum damage. You did not want to disown me in private. You wanted to destroy my reputation in front of the people who employ me and the people who support me. That is not a moral stand. That is a press conference. I swiped my thumb across my phone screen. My father mentioned a pattern of choices. I continued. He implied I am asking for money, that I am a drain on them. I held the phone up to the microphone. This is a voicemail I received from my mother 3 weeks ago. I pressed play. The sound system was excellent. My mother's voice filled the room, crisp and clear, stripped of the public sorrow she was currently wearing. Madeline, pick up the phone. Gordon is losing patience. You need to come over and sign the paperwork for the Collins Hope Initiative renewal. We cannot file the annual report without the director's signatures. Stop being difficult. It is just a signature. We do all the work. You just take the credit. Call me. I let the recording hang there for a second before hitting stop. I looked at the crowd. I have never been a director of the Collins Hope Initiative. I said, I have never attended a board meeting. I have never voted on a budget. Until I got that voicemail, I did not know I was listed as an officer. Gordon's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. He stepped forward, reaching for the microphone. That is enough. Madeline, he hissed. You are making a scene. I stepped back, out of his reach. I am not the one who made the scene. Gordon, I said, you walked into my birthday party, uninvited, and announced I was dead to you. You do not get to decide when the scene ends. I turned back to the guests. I am not asking you to choose sides. I said, I know how uncomfortable this is. I just want you to notice something. Notice that my parents are not talking about a crime I committed. They are not talking about a specific lie I told. They are using shame. They are using the threat of social isolation to keep me in line. I looked at my mother. She was still standing by the kitchen, but she had looked up now. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. You can disown me. I said to them, you can keep your money. I have not taken a dime from you in 5 years, as my tax returns will show, but you cannot use my name anymore. You cannot use me as a prop for your foundation, and you certainly cannot come into my home and bully me into submission. Gordon lunged then. It was clumsy, a desperate grab for control. He snatched at the microphone, his fingernails scratching against the metal mesh. The feedback squeal was ear-splitting. Give it to me, he shouted, his mask slipping entirely. I let go. I did not fight him for it. I let him have the microphone. He stood there, panting, holding the mic like a weapon. But the damage was done. The silence in the room was different now. It was not shocked anymore. It was judgmental. Gordon looked around, realizing he had lost the room. He realized that by trying to silence me physically, he had proven my point about control. He glared at me, his chest heaving. You are ungrateful, he spat. Though without the microphone, his voice sounded small. You are finished in this town. He turned and marched toward the exit. Elise hesitated for a moment, looking at me with something that might have been fear, before hurrying after him. The double doors swung shut behind them. For a long moment, nobody moved. The jazz band stared at their instruments. The waiters stood frozen with trays of untouched salmon. Then Tessa was beside me, her arm around my waist, holding me up. "I am okay," I whispered, but I was shaking now. The adrenaline was ebbing, leaving a cold hollow in my stomach. People started to move. It was awkward. The party was effectively over. How do you cut a cake after an execution? Guests began to collect their coats, murmuring apologies, avoiding my eyes not out of judgment, but out of sheer secondhand trauma. Marjorie Klein, a woman who had been my mother's college roommate and a fixture at our holiday dinners for 20 years, walked up to me. She was a lawyer, sharp and terrifyingly intelligent. She had watched the entire exchange from a table near the back, sipping her wine. She did not hug me. She did not say she was sorry. She pressed a folded square of paper into my palm. "Check the foundation filings," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your signature is not yours." She pulled back before I could ask her what she meant. She gave me a look that was intense, almost frightened, and then she turned and followed the stream of guests out the door. I stood there, clutching the note, as the room emptied. The staff began to clear the tables, moving quietly, treating me like a bereaved widow. I went to the manager. "David, did you get it?" I asked. He nodded, looking pale. "Every second. I will email the file to you tonight." "Thank you," I said. I paid the bill. I tipped the staff 40% because they had had to witness a family implosion. Tessa wanted to take me home, but I told her I needed a minute. I needed to be alone. I walked out the back entrance of the venue, stepping into the biting cold of the Harbor Glen night. The wind coming off the water was sharp, cutting through my silk dress, but I welcomed it. It felt real. It numbed the stinging in my eyes. I refused to cry. I would not give them that satisfaction, even in private. I walked to the edge of the parking lot, leaning against the rough brick of the building. The stars were washed out by the security lights. "Excuse me, Miss Collins?" I jumped, turning around. A man in a catering jacket was standing near the dumpster, smoking a cigarette. He looked to be about my age, maybe a little older, with tired eyes and a scar running through his eyebrow. "I am sorry," I said, straightening up. "I was just leaving." He dropped his cigarette and crushed it under the heel of his boot. He looked around the empty lot, checking the shadows. He walked over to me, moving quickly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was plain. Cheap cardstock. "Jonah Pike, Logistics." "Take this," he said. I hesitated. "Who are you?" "I was in the kitchen," he said. "I heard what happened. I used to work for your dad. About 4 years ago." He pressed the card into my hand. His fingers were rough, calloused. "Your dad has been paying the wrong people," he whispered. "What does that mean?" I asked, but he was already backing away. "Just check the storage unit," he said, "the one in Bryer County. And be careful." He turned and disappeared into the dark, slipping between the parked cars before I could ask another question. I stood alone in the parking lot, the wind whipping my hair across my face. In one hand, I held Marjorie's note about a forged signature. In the other, I held a stranger's card warning me about my father's payroll. My parents had come here tonight to end me, to write the final chapter of Madeline the Failure. I looked down at the business card. They had wanted a tragedy. Instead, they had just started a war. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and got in. I did not turn on the ignition immediately. I sat in the silence, listening to the blood rushing in my ears. The morning sun that hit my living room floor was too bright, too cheerful, and entirely unwelcome. I sat on the edge of my sofa, wrapped in a knit blanket, staring at a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. My head throbbed, not from alcohol, but from the sheer, crushing weight of an adrenaline hangover. I replayed the night before in a loop. I dissected it like I would a failed marketing campaign at work. The way my father held the microphone, the way my mother studied the floorboards, the specific phrasing of a pattern of choices. At the time, it had felt like an ambush, but in the harsh light of morning, I realized it was something far worse. It was a production. They had not been emotional. There was no heat in my father's eyes, no waver in his voice until I took the microphone away. They had not been reacting to a daughter they found difficult. They were executing a strategy, the guest list, the timing, the venue. It was all calculated to maximize witness count and minimize my ability to respond. They wanted me shamed into silence. They wanted me discredited before I even knew I was on trial. Why? The question gnawed at me. Parents do not stage a public disowning just because they are disappointed in a career choice or a boyfriend. They do it because they need to sever a limb to save the body. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I flinched. I had 50 unread text messages from friends who had been at the party, ranging from, "Are you okay?" to, "What the hell was that?" I ignored them all. I was not ready to perform wellness for anyone. I opened my laptop instead. I needed to work. I needed something solvable. My personal email inbox was flooded, but one subject line stood out, burying itself in the clutter of newsletters and receipts. Collins Hope Initiative, Board Renewal Confirmation. I froze. My finger hovered over the trackpad. The timestamp was from 4 a.m. I clicked it open. Dear Madeline, thank you for your continued dedication to the Collins Hope Initiative. We are thrilled to confirm your renewed commitment as a director for the upcoming fiscal year. Attached. Please find your countersigned acceptance of the bylaws and the conflict of interest policy. Sincerely, the administration team. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I had not signed anything. I had not even spoken to them. I downloaded the PDF attachment. It was a standard legal document, dense with jargon about fiduciary duties and liability waivers. I scrolled to the bottom of the last page. There, above the line labeled Madeline Collins. Director was a signature. It was written in blue ink. It looped and slanted to the right, to a stranger, or a bank teller glancing quickly. It would look exactly like my name, but it was not my hand. I write my capital M with a sharp peak, a habit from architecture classes I took in college. The M on the screen was soft, rounded. I crossed my T's with a short, upward strike. These T's were crossed with a flat, lazy line. It was a forgery, and it was not just a bad attempt. It was a practiced imitation. Someone had studied how I signed my name and learned to mimic it well enough to pass casual inspection, but poorly enough that a handwriting expert would spot it in 10 seconds. I printed the document. The paper felt warm coming out of the printer. I held it up to the light, staring at the lie in black and white. They were not just using my name. They were binding me legally to an organization I knew nothing about. I needed a lawyer. I did not call the corporate counsel at Larkin Finch. I could not risk this bleeding into my work life more than it already had. I remembered a name Tessa had mentioned once, a woman who had helped her sister through a nasty business dissolution, Avery Hensley. I found the number for Hensley and Crow LLP and dialed. It rang 4 times before a receptionist put me through. Avery Hensley speaking. Her voice was dry, clipped, and devoid of the customer service warmth I was used to. "Ms. Hensley," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "My name is Madeline Collins. Tessa Marlowe recommended you. I have a situation involving family, a nonprofit, and a signature that is not mine. I can fit you in at 11, she said. "Bring everything." The office of Hensley and Crow was in a converted warehouse in the financial district, stripped back and efficient. Avery Hensley was a woman in her 50s with short, steel gray hair and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She did not offer me coffee. She pointed to a chair and opened a yellow legal pad. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything: the party, the speech, the voicemail, the email I had received that morning. Avery listened without interrupting. She wrote constantly, her pen scratching loudly across the paper. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "I do not promise victory. Madeline," she said, "the law is a blunt instrument, and families are complicated. I only promise clarity. Clarity is what I need," I said. She tapped the printout of the forged document I had placed on her desk. "This is the pivot point," she said. "If they are forging your signature on internal governance documents, they are likely doing it elsewhere. financial filings, grant applications, tax returns. Is it fraud? I asked. It is definitely fraud, she said. But proving who held the pen is difficult. What matters right now is not the crime, but the liability. If you are a director, you are liable for the organization's debts and conduct. If they get sued, you get sued. If they owe the IRS money, the IRS comes looking for you. My stomach turned. What do I do? We gather records, Avery said. We build a wall of paper. I want you to find every public mention of your name in connection with this foundation. I want to know when you were appointed, who else is on the board, and where the money comes from. Do not confront them yet. If you scream fraud now, they will shred everything. We need to know what they are hiding before we tell them we are looking. She leaned forward. And Madeline? This is not a family dispute anymore. This is a business transaction. Treat it like one. I spent the afternoon in a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment, treating my life like a research project. I started with the public databases. The Collins Hope Initiative was registered as a 501c3 charitable organization. The stated mission was vague, supporting community development and educational pathways for at-risk youth. I pulled the Form 990 tax filings for the last 3 years. There I was, Madeline Collins, director, listed right below Gordon Collins, president, and Elise Collins, secretary. According to the forms, I worked an average of 5 hours per week for the foundation. I had never worked a minute. Then I saw the donor list. In the annual report from 2 years ago, there was a list of Platinum Circle donors. My name was there. Madeline Collins. $25,000. I laughed out loud, a harsh barking sound that made the barista look up. $25,000. 2 years ago, I was still paying off my student loans. I barely had $2,500 in savings, let alone $25,000 to give away. They were cycling money. They were using my name to wash cash, making it look like legitimate donations. I kept digging. I searched for event photos. The foundation held an annual gala, the Winter Hope Ball. I had never been invited. My parents always told me it was a boring event for old people and that I would hate it. I found a gallery of images on a local society page, Gordon and Elise Collins with board members. I clicked on the photo. My parents were smiling, holding crystal flutes of champagne. Standing next to them, slightly turned away from the camera, was a woman. She was wearing a long navy dress. She had my build. She had my hair color. The caption read, "The Collins family?" I zoomed in. The woman's hair was styled in a French twist. I had not worn my hair long enough for a twist in 5 years. I kept mine in a sharp, shoulder-length bob. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold prickle of violation. They had hired a stand-in. They had put a woman in a dress, stood her next to them, and let people assume it was me. They had created a version of Madeline who was silent, compliant, and present, while the real Madeline was kept at arm's length. It was gaslighting on an industrial scale. I needed to see them, not to talk to them, but to see the stage they were playing on. I got in my car and drove to Renford. Renford was a suburb of manicured lawns and aggressive silence. It was the kind of place where people hired services to hang their Christmas lights, and neighbors only spoke to complain about property lines. My parents lived in a large colonial on a corner lot. The house was pristine. The white siding gleamed. The hedges were trimmed into geometric perfection. I parked my car down the street, obscured by a large oak tree. I did not want them to see me. I just wanted to look. The house looked the same as it always had, yet different. It felt like a fortress now. Then I noticed the camera. It was mounted on the corner of the garage, a sleek black orb, but it was not pointed at the street or the front door. It was pointed directly at the driveway, angled down to capture license plates and faces of anyone entering the perimeter. It was new, and it was high-end. Why would a retired couple running a small charity need surveillance-grade security? My phone buzzed. It was Lila Trent, my cousin. Lila was 22, sweet, and perpetually terrified of the family hierarchy. "Can you meet?" she texted. "Starbucks on Main. Please don't tell Uncle Gordon." I looked at the house one last time. The camera lens seemed to glint in the afternoon sun, a mechanical eye that never blinked. I put the car in gear and drove away. Lila was sitting in the back corner of the Starbucks, hunched over a latte, looking like she was waiting for a drug deal. When she saw me, she jumped up and hugged me, her grip tight and trembling. "I am so sorry, Maddie," she whispered. "I wanted to say something last night, but my mom was gripping my leg under the table so hard, I think I have a bruise. It is okay." "Lila," I said, sitting down, "I do not blame you." She looked around the shop, checking for spies. "It is crazy," she said. "Everyone is talking about it. Uncle Gordon sent a message to the family group chat this morning." "Show me," I said. She hesitated, then unlocked her phone and slid it across the table. The message was from Gordon Collins. "Family, thank you for your support last night. It was a difficult step, but necessary. We ask that you stay disciplined in your interactions. Madeline is in a volatile state. Do not engage with her. We are handling the fallout. Protect the family name. Stay disciplined." It sounded like a military order. Lila took the phone back. "There is a rumor, Maddie," she said quietly. "My mom told me this morning. She said the reason they disowned you is because you stole money." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "She said you have been skimming from the foundation for years," Lila said, her eyes filling with tears. "She said Uncle Gordon has been covering for you, paying it back out of his own pocket. But the amounts got too big. She said you have a gambling problem." I sat back, stunned. It was brilliant. It was evil. But it was brilliant. They were projecting their own crimes onto me. If I accused them of fraud, they would say, "No, she is the one who stole. That is why we cut her off. She is lashing out. I do not gamble, Lila." I said, "You know that. I know." She said, "I told my mom that. I told her you worry about spending $5 on avocado toast." But they believe him. "Maddie, he has spreadsheets." "Spreadsheets. Of course he did. Lila, I need you to do something for me." I said, "I cannot get in trouble," she said, her voice rising in panic. "You won't. I just need you to tell me if you hear anything else, anything specific, if they mention dates, or amounts, or people." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "There is one thing," she said. "I heard my dad on the phone with Gordon earlier. Gordon was yelling. He kept saying, 'She cannot find the Bryan County files. If she goes to Bryan, we are dead.' Bryan County, the catering man, Jonah Pike, had mentioned a storage unit in Bryan County." I reached across the table and squeezed Lila's hand. "Thank you," I said. "You just helped me more than you know." I went home and tore my apartment apart. If they were accusing me of theft, they had to have a paper trail. Gordon was meticulous. He would not just invent a lie. He would build a backdrop for it. I dug through boxes of old tax returns and college paperwork. I found a file labeled Banking Old. Inside was a folder for a joint checking account I had opened with my father when I was 18. It was a student saver account, meant for tuition transfers and book money. I had stopped using it when I graduated, assuming it was closed. I logged into the bank's portal. I had to reset the password, guessing the answers to security questions I had set a decade ago. Name of first pet? Buster. The account opened. It was not closed. It was active. I stared at the transaction history, every month, for the last 4 years. There was a deposit of $2,000, followed immediately by a transfer out to an entity called Sterling Ridge Consulting. In and out. In and out. The deposits were labeled consulting fee. The transfers were labeled vendor payment. I clicked on the details. The source of the deposits? Collins Hope Initiative. They were paying me a salary I never received, depositing it into an account I thought was dead, and then funneling it out to a shell company. I printed the statements. My hands were shaking. This was not just using my name for prestige. This was embezzlement. They were siphoning money from the charity, running it through my identity, and moving it to Sterling Ridge. If the IRS audited the foundation, the trail would lead straight to me. I was the consultant. I was the one receiving the funds. The fact that the money immediately left the account would just look like I was paying a subcontractor. I called Avery. I found the money. I said, "Send it to me." She said. I scanned the documents and emailed them. 10 minutes later. She called back. "Sterling Ridge Consulting." She said, "I ran a quick check. It is a registered LLC in Delaware. The registered agent is a generic corporate service, but the mailing address is a P.O. box in Bryan County." I finished. "Exactly," she said. Madeline, this is serious. If they have been filing tax returns claiming they paid you $24,000 a year, you are on the hook for taxes on income you never saw. And if Sterling Ridge is a fake company, you are a participant in money laundering. They set me up. I said, "They spent years setting me up." "Yes," Avery said, "and that is why they disowned you. They are about to close the loop. If the foundation collapses, or if they get caught, you are the scapegoat, the unstable, estranged daughter who stole from the family charity." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was heavier than the hurt I had felt last night. It was solid. "How do I stop them?" I asked. "We follow the money," Avery said. "But we need to know who is behind Sterling Ridge, and we need to know what is in Bryan County." I looked at the business card Jonah Pike had given me. "Jonah Pike, Logistics." I called the number. "Yeah?" a voice answered. It sounded rough, like gravel in a mixer. "Jonah? This is Madeline Collins. You gave me your card last night." There was a long pause. I heard the sound of a lighter flicking, then a sharp exhale. "I wondered if you would call," he said. "You said my dad was paying the wrong people. I need to know what you meant." "Not on the phone," he said. "Meet me at the struggling diner on 4th, the one with the broken neon sign. Half an hour." The diner was called the Fork and Spoon, but the spoon had burned out, leaving it as the fork. It smelled of grease and stale coffee. Jonah was sitting in a booth at the back, wearing a hooded sweatshirt and a baseball cap pulled low. I slid into the seat across from him. He didn't smile. "You got guts. I will give you that," he said. "Standing up to Gordon like that, I haven't seen anyone do that in 10 years. "You worked for him?" I asked. "I did events," he said. "Set up, tear down, transport. But with Gordon, nothing is just tables and chairs. He likes things. Specific." He took a sip of his coffee. "I was the one who drove the truck to Bryan County," he said. "Once a month, I would pick up boxes from the house, from the office he keeps locked, and drive them to a storage unit." "What was in the boxes?" "Files, mostly," Jonah said. "Shredded paper sometimes, but sometimes whole binders." He called it the archive, but he was paranoid about it. He made me sign a non-disclosure agreement just to drive a U-Haul. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Jonah looked at me. His eyes were tired. "Because he stiffed me." He said, "He owes me $5,000 for the last job. And because I saw what he did to you last night. I have a kid, Madeline, a little girl. If I ever treated her like a disposable asset, I would hope someone would punch me in the throat." He leaned in. "Gordon keeps a ledger, a shadow ledger. It tracks the real money, not the stuff they show the IRS, the real donations, and where they actually go." "Where do they go?" "Sterling Ridge," he said. "And a few others, but Sterling Ridge is the big one. It is not a consulting firm. It is a debt collection agency. Or, it acts like one. It buys debt." "My father is paying off debt?" I asked. "No," Jonah said. "He is buying other people's debt. He uses the foundation money to buy leverage on people. Local politicians, business owners. He buys their bad loans through Sterling Ridge, and then he owns them." The room spun slightly. It wasn't just theft. It was extortion. The foundation was a front for a power brokering scheme. "And the ledger?" I asked. "Where is it?" "It is in the storage unit," Jonah said. "Unit 404 at Briar Self-Storage. But you cannot just walk in. It is coded, and it is under a fake name." "Whose name?" "Celia Rourke," he said. "She is the admin assistant at the foundation. Nice lady. Scared of her own shadow? He made her sign the lease." I sat back against the vinyl booth. The scope of it was staggering. My parents were running a criminal enterprise disguised as a charity, and they had pasted my face on the front of it. Jonah slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is the gate code," he said. "I still remember it, but I don't have the key to the unit. You will have to figure that out. Thank you." "Jonah?" I said. He shrugged. "Watch your back. Madeline, Gordon looks like a country club gentleman, but he plays dirty. If he knows you are getting close to the money, he will come for you, hard." I drove back to my apartment in the dark. The city lights blurred past me. I stood in the center of my living room. It was quiet. The silence that had felt lonely this morning now felt like a sanctuary. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. I could walk away. I could change my name, move to another state, and start over. I could let them have the narrative. I could let them tell everyone I was a thief and a failure. But if I did that, they won. And more importantly, if I did that, I would be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life, waiting for the IRS or the FBI to knock on my door for crimes I didn't commit. My mother's voice from the voicemail echoed in my head. "Stop being difficult." I looked at the reflection of my own eyes in the glass. They looked tired, but they didn't look frightened anymore. I was not going to fix this relationship. I was not going to cry my way back into their good graces. That family was gone. It had never really existed. I was going to Bryan County. I was going to find that ledger. And I was going to burn their perfect, lie-infested house to the ground, using the very paper they had tried to bury me with. I picked up my phone and texted Avery. "I have a lead on the records. We are going to Bryan County." Then I texted Tessa. "Are you free this weekend? I need a co-pilot." I turned off the lights. The investigation was over. The raid was about to begin. The drive to Bryan County was a study in grayscale. The sky was the color of wet cement, hanging low over the highway, and the landscape rushing past the windows of Tessa's sedan was a blur of dormant cornfields and rusted billboards. I checked the passenger side mirror for the 4th time in 2 miles. "You are doing it again," Tessa said. Her eyes remained fixed on the road. Her grip on the steering wheel relaxed but steady. "Doing what?" I asked, forcing my gaze back to the dashboard. "Checking for a tail." She said, "Madeline, we are in a Honda Civic on a Tuesday morning. Nobody is following us. Gordon and Elise are not the CIA. They are just narcissists with a checkbook. I am not checking for a tail." I lied. "I am just restless." Tessa did not answer. The silence that filled the car was heavy, not because we had nothing to say, but because I had too much running through my head to articulate any of it. I kept rehearsing conversations I would never have. I imagined screaming at my father until his composure cracked. I imagined shaking my mother until she admitted she saw me as a person, not a prop. "Are you okay?" Tessa asked, her voice softening. I looked out the window. A dead tree stood alone in a field, its branches black and skeletal against the gray sky. The question was too big. Was I okay? My parents had publicly executed my reputation. I was investigating a money laundering scheme that carried my name. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop at my job. I stayed silent. I could not lie to her, and I did not have the energy to tell the truth. We took the exit for Bryan County. It was a place that felt forgotten, a collection of strip malls and auto body shops that had seen better decades. Breyer Self-Storage sat at the end of a long gravel road, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It looked less like a storage facility and more like a holding pen. "Pull over here," I said. Tessa idled the car near the entrance. I pulled up the code Jonah had given me on my phone. "Okay," I said. "Here is the plan. We are not breaking in. We are just verifying. I am going to go into the office. I am a listed director of the Collins Hope Initiative. If this unit is paid for by the foundation, or an entity connected to it, I have a right to ask about the billing status." "That is bold," Tessa said. "You are using their lie to get the truth. It is the only leverage I have." I said. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of diesel and damp earth. I smoothed my coat, put on my best corporate smile, and walked into the front office. The man behind the counter was watching a game show on a small television. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Help you?" he grunted. "Hi," I said, projecting the kind of cheerful authority I used with difficult clients. "My name is Madeline Collins. I am a director with the Collins Hope Initiative. We rent Unit 404. I am just passing through and wanted to make sure our account was current. We had some mix-ups with our auto pay recently. I placed my driver's license on the counter. It was a gamble. If the unit was just in Celia Rourke's name, he might turn me away. But if Jonah was right about the complexity of the scheme, there would be layers." The man sighed, muted the television, and typed slowly on his keyboard. "Unit 404, he muttered. "Rourke?" "Yes, Celia Rourke," I said quickly. "She is our administrator." He squinted at the screen. "Yeah, it is current. Paid through the end of the year." "Great," I said, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "And that is still being billed to the primary card? The Sterling Ridge account?" He clicked a few times. "Sterling Ridge Consulting. Yeah, Visa ending in 4588. You want a receipt?" I felt a jolt of electricity run down my spine. There it was, the connection. "Actually, yes," I said. "That would be wonderful for my records." He printed a slip of paper and slid it across the counter. I took it, my fingers brushing against the warm thermal paper. It listed the unit, the renter as Celia Rourke, and the billing entity as Sterling Ridge Consulting. "Thank you," I said. "You have been very helpful." I walked back to the car, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I climbed in and held up the receipt. "We got it," I said. Tessa looked at the paper. "Celia Rourke," she read, "and Sterling Ridge. Okay, so the foundation employee rents it, but the shell company pays for it." I took a photo of the receipt and texted it to Avery Hensley immediately. "Confirmed. Unit 404, rented by Rourke, paid by Sterling Ridge. Photo attached." Avery's reply came 2 minutes later. "Good work. Do not open the unit. Do not touch anything. I am filing a preservation request and a demand for inspection based on your status as a director. If they destroy anything now, it is spoliation of evidence. Let's go." I said to Tessa, "I have seen enough of this place." The drive back was quieter, but the tension had shifted. It was no longer vague anxiety. It was focused dread. We had proof, but proof was dangerous. My phone buzzed in my lap. I picked it up, expecting another update from Avery or a check-in from Lila. It was a text from my mother. I stared at the preview on the screen, feeling my stomach twist. "We did what we had to do. You will understand when you are a mother." I read it twice. The words were soft, almost gentle. They were meant to sound like wisdom, like a heavy-hearted lesson passed down from one generation to the next, but they were razor blades wrapped in cotton. She was not apologizing. She was not explaining. She was framing their betrayal as a form of protection, a necessary sacrifice for a greater good that I was too immature to grasp. And by invoking motherhood, she was striking at a specific insecurity, the idea that I was fundamentally different from them, that I lacked the instinct to do what was necessary. They were telling me I was defective. I dropped the phone into the cup holder as if it were hot. "What is it?" Tessa asked, glancing over. "My mother," I said. "She says I will understand why they destroyed my life when I have children." Tessa gripped the steering wheel tighter. "That is vile," she said. "That is actually vile." It made me think, though. My mind raced back through the years, connecting dots I had ignored. "Tessa," I said, "my parents always did my taxes." "What?" "When I was in college. Even when I started working. My dad has that accountant he has used for 30 years. He always said, 'Just sign the forms. Madeline, do not worry about the details. We will handle the filing fees.'" "So?" Tessa asked. "So, I signed where they told me to sign." I said, "Blank forms. Sometimes. Or forms they had already filled out. I never checked the numbers. I never asked for copies. I trusted them. I looked out the window at the passing traffic. They have had my signature on file for a decade." I said, "They have copies of my driver's license, my social security card, my birth certificate. They did not just decide to use my identity last month. They have been curating it. They have been keeping me dependent on their administrative help so they could keep a copy of my legal self. It makes sense, Tessa said quietly. If they wanted to forge your signature, they had a perfect reference library. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just money, it was a complete co-opting of my personhood. To them, Madeline Collins was not a daughter. She was an asset class, a shell entity they could inhabit whenever they needed to hide something. When I got back to my apartment, I felt exposed. I locked the door and checked the windows, a paranoia that felt ridiculous yet necessary. I sat at my kitchen island and opened my laptop. I needed to know more about the events. If they had a look-alike, where else had she appeared? My phone rang. It was Jonah Pike. I answered on the first ring. I went to Briar. I said, "You were right." "I know I was right," Jonah said. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. "Listen, I remembered something else. Something that might explain the photos you found." "The look-alike?" I asked. "Yeah, about 3 years ago. There was a fundraiser in the city, the Gala for Hope, big-ticket items, senators, local celebrities. Gordon was obsessed with it. I remember them talking about it. I said, they told me it was strictly for major donors and I would be bored." "Right," Jonah said. "Well, on the night of the event, Gordon was freaking out backstage. He was yelling at Elise that the optics needed to be perfect. He kept saying the board needed to present a united front. And then this woman showed up," Jonah said. "She came in the back entrance. She was wearing a dress that matched Elise's color palette. She had your hair, your height. I thought it was you. Madeline." I went up to say hello, to ask about the loadout for the swag bags. "What happened?" I asked, my grip on the phone tightening. Gordon stepped in between us. Jonah said, "He looked panicked. He told me, Madeline has severe stage fright tonight. Jonah, do not speak to her. She needs to focus." "Stage fright," I repeated. The woman didn't say a word. Jonah said, "She just smiled. It was vacant, like she was high or just paid to be a mannequin. She stood on that stage for 2 hours, waved when they introduced the board, and then left out the back door before the dessert was served." I closed my eyes. "They hired an actress," I whispered, "or a pro." Jonah said, "Whatever she was not there to be a director. She was there to be a prop. They needed Madeline Collins, the name, to be attached to Madeline Collins, the face. So the checkbook looked legitimate." "Thank you, Jonah." I said, "Be careful," he said again. "The more you dig, the more rocks you're going to find. And there are snakes under all of them." 2 days later, I was sitting in Avery Hensley's office. The table was covered in spreadsheets. "We have a pattern," Avery said. She looked energized, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Show me," I said. "Look at the pledge drive from 2 years ago," she said, pointing to a column of numbers. "They announced $300,000 in pledges. Big fanfare. Photos in the paper. Okay, now look at the expenses for the following quarter," she said. She slid another sheet over. Consulting fees, venue rentals, catering overages, security retainers, the vendors. Avery said, "Look at the names. Sterling Ridge, Apex Logistics, Harbor View Event Planning. I do not recognize the last two." I said, "They are ghosts," Avery said. "I ran them. Apex is registered to a residential address in Nevada that belongs to a deceased woman. Harbor View is a P.O. box in the same strip mall as Sterling Ridge. So they take the donations," I said, trying to follow the flow. "And they pay these fake companies for services that never happen?" "Exactly." Avery said, "They pledge the money publicly to look successful. They collect real checks from real donors who think they are helping kids. Then they drain the accounts by paying themselves through these shell companies. It is classic laundering. They are cleaning the money and putting it right back in their pockets, or using it to pay off the debts Jonah mentioned. And I am the face of it." I said. Avery nodded. "You are the listed director who supposedly approves these budgets. If this house of cards falls, the narrative will be that Gordon and Elise were elderly philanthropists who were duped by their daughter and her network of shell companies. They built a trap door, I said, and they put me standing on it. We need to file the injunction, Avery said. We need to freeze their ability to use your name. But Madeline, once we do that, it is war. There is no going back. File it, I said. The blowback was faster than I expected. I was at my desk at Lark and Finch on Thursday morning, trying to focus on a media buy for a tech client, when my internal line rang, Madeline, can you come to my office? It was Marcus, my managing director. His voice was neutral, too neutral. I walked to his office, my stomach churning. Marcus was a good man, fair and direct, but he answered to a board of directors who cared about one thing: reputation. He was standing by the window when I entered. He didn't sit down. Close the door, he said. I clicked the door shut and stood there, waiting. I got a call this morning, Marcus said, from a member of our board. He was playing golf yesterday with a friend of your father's. I felt the blood rush to my ears. It was spreading. The poison was leaking out of Harbor Glen and into the city. Marcus turned to face me. They asked if you were under investigation, he said. They heard rumors about financial impropriety, about a charity. I took a deep breath. I had prepared for this. I knew I had to be perfect. Marcus, I said, keeping my voice steady, my parents and I are in the middle of a legal dispute. It involves the unauthorized use of my identity on corporate filings for their foundation. Identity misuse? Marcus asked, his eyebrows raising. Yes, I said. I discovered they listed me as a director without my consent. I am working with legal counsel to correct the record. The rumors you are hearing are a strategy. They are trying to discredit me before the facts come out. Marcus looked at me for a long time. He was assessing me. He was looking for the unstable daughter my father had described. He was looking for the thief. I value your work, Madeline, he said finally. You are one of the best strategists we have. Thank you, I said. But we are a media company, he said. Perception is our product. If this gets messy, if there are headlines, I cannot protect you from the board. I understand. I said, I will keep it contained. I just ask for a little flexibility while I deal with the lawyers. He nodded. Keep it contained. And Madeline? I hope you are telling me the truth. I am. I said. I walked out of his office with my head high. I nodded to my assistant. I went to the break room and poured a cup of water. Then I went down to the parking garage, got into my car, and locked the doors. I didn't scream. I didn't hit the steering wheel. I just folded forward until my forehead rested against the cool leather of the wheel, and I shook. I shook from the exhaustion of it. I shook because I was fighting a war on 3 fronts: legal, familial, and professional. And I was doing it alone. The unfairness of it felt like a physical weight, pressing the air out of my lungs. They were safe in their mansion, sipping wine, while I was hyperventilating in a parking garage, terrified that one phone call could end my career. I sat there for 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face, checked my makeup in the mirror, and went back upstairs to finish the media buy. That evening, I met Lila at the library. It was the only place she felt safe meeting me. Somewhere quiet where we couldn't be overheard. She looked terrified. She was clutching a heavy tote bag. I found something, she whispered. She pulled out an old, leather-bound photo album. It smelled of mildew and dust. This is from my grandma's house, Lila said, before she passed. She gave me a bunch of old boxes. Uncle Gordon wanted them, but I hid this one. She opened the album. It was filled with Polaroids from the 90s. Family barbecues, Christmases. Turn to 1998, she said. I flipped the pages. I saw myself as a teenager. Braces, awkward haircuts. I saw my parents, younger, sharper. Then I came to a page that was empty. There were adhesive corners still stuck to the paper, but the photos had been ripped out. The caption at the bottom, written in my grandmother's looping script, read, "The incident, August 12th. The incident." I whispered, "Everyone talks about it," Lila said, "but nobody says what it was. They just say, that was the night everything changed, or that was when we knew Madeline was troubled." I stared at the empty page. I had no memory of August 12th, 1998. It was a blank spot in my mind. "There is more," Lila said. She leaned in closer. "My dad told me that the day after this date, whatever happened, Uncle Gordon burned a box in the backyard. My dad saw him. He said Gordon was burning papers and clothes. He said Gordon looked like he had seen a ghost." "Burning clothes?" I asked. Lila nodded. "Whatever happened that night, Maddie, they erased it, and they built the story of Madeline the troubled child right on top of the ashes." I ran my fingers over the empty spots on the page. "I was 12. I said, what could a 12-year-old do that requires burning evidence?" "I do not know." Lila said, "But I think that is the leverage. I think that is why they are so scared you will talk. They are not just hiding money. They are hiding history." I went home that night feeling like a stranger in my own life. I had a forged signature, a shadow bank account, a body double, and now a missing memory from my childhood that my father had incinerated. I was too tired to think. I just wanted to sleep. But when I checked my mail, there was a rigid envelope sitting in my box. It was certified mail. Greenwood Associates, my father's law firm. I tore it open right there in the hallway. Notice of emergency board meeting. To Madeline Collins, Director, from the Board of the Collins Hope Initiative. You are hereby notified of a special emergency meeting of the Board of Directors to be held on Monday, November 12th, at 9 a.m. at the Foundation offices in Glasswell Heights. Agenda: review of governance, breach of fiduciary duty allegations, and vote on director removal. Your attendance is required pursuant to Article 4 of the bylaws. Failure to attend will be construed as an admission of guilt regarding the charges of negligence and absenteeism. I stared at the letter. They were doubling down. They knew I was investigating. They knew I had found the storage unit. So they were dragging me into the light. They were forcing me to come to their turf, to sit in a room with them, and play the game by their rules. If I didn't go, they would vote to remove me and paint it as an admission of guilt. They would say I was too cowardly to face them. But if I did go, I looked at the date. Monday. I took out my phone and dialed Avery. "Get your suit ready," I said when she answered. "What happened?" she asked. "They invited me to a board meeting." I said, "They want to fire me officially." "Good," Avery said. Her voice was cold. "Why is that good?" "Because," she said, "if they invite you to a board meeting, they are acknowledging you are a director, and directors have the right to inspect every single document in the room." I looked at the letter again. "I am not going there to be fired." "Avery," I said. "I know." She said, "I am going there to take the minutes." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Glasswell Tower was silent enough to hear the hum of the cables. The building was a monolith of steel and blue glass, rising out of the financial district like a jagged tooth. It was the kind of place designed to make human beings feel small, temporary, and easily replaced. I stood near the doors, my hands clasped in front of me to hide the fact that my knuckles were white. Beside me, Avery Hensley looked like she was on her way to a casual lunch. She wore a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection, and she held a slim leather briefcase that I knew contained the dismantling of my parents' carefully constructed reality. "Just breathe, Madeline," she said, her voice low. "Remember, you are not a daughter today. You are a director. You are equal in rank." I nodded, staring at the digital numbers climbing the wall. "I am a director," I whispered. The door slid open with a soft chime. The reception area of the Collins Hope Initiative was breathtaking. It was a space I had never seen before, despite supposedly serving on the board for 5 years. The floors were polished marble, and the walls were adorned with large, abstract canvases that likely cost more than my annual salary. A tasteful silver sign behind the desk read, "Collins Hope, Building Tomorrow." It was impressive, it was expensive, and it was all paid for by a lie. "Mr. and Mrs. Collins are expecting you in the boardroom," the receptionist said. She was young, smiling, and completely unaware that she was greeting the enemy. We walked down a long hallway lined with frosted glass. I could see the silhouettes of people moving inside the offices: staff, employees, people whose livelihoods depended on the fiction my parents had written. Avery opened the heavy oak door at the end of the hall, and we stepped inside. The boardroom was vast, dominated by a table that looked like a single slab of black granite. At the far end, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city, sat my parents. Gordon looked pleased. He was leaning back in his leather chair, his fingers steeped together, watching us enter with the benevolent expression of a king granting an audience to a rebellious peasant. The setting gave him power. In our living room, he was just a father. Here, he was the president. Elise sat to his right, her posture rigid. She was wearing a cream blazer that made her look severe. Her hair pulled back so tightly it pulled at the corners of her eyes. There were others in the room. A man I didn't recognize, presumably their lawyer, sat with a notepad, and in the corner, looking like she wanted to dissolve into the carpet, was a woman I guessed was Celia Rourke. She was clutching a tablet to her chest, her eyes darting between Gordon and the door. "Please, sit," Gordon said, gesturing to the empty chairs at the opposite end of the table. We sat. The distance between us felt like a canyon. "I am glad you came, Madeline," Gordon said. He didn't look at Avery. He focused entirely on me. "Despite the unfortunate display at your birthday, we are still a family, and families fix things. We are here to discuss governance," Avery said, her voice cutting through his warmth like a scalpel. "And to review the allegations of breach of fiduciary duty," Gordon's smile tightened at the edges. "Of course," he said. "We have prepared a statement." He slid a folder across the granite. It traveled the length of the table with a hiss of paper against stone. Avery stopped it with one hand. "We have had to take certain protective measures," Gordon said. "Given Madeline's recent behavior, the public outburst, the paranoid accusations, the harassment of our staff, we felt it was necessary to formalize the separation we announced." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that reasonable, fatherly tone that made my skin crawl. "We are willing to walk back the disowning. Madeline, we are willing to reconsider our stance, but we need to see a gesture of good faith from you. We need to know you are stable enough to be part of this legacy." Avery opened the folder. I looked over her shoulder. It was a resignation letter. "I, Madeline Collins, hereby resign from the board of directors, effective immediately. I acknowledge that my previous actions were the result of personal health challenges. I agreed to a lifetime non-disparagement clause regarding the foundation and its officers. It was a gag order disguised as a truce. If I signed this, I wasn't just quitting. I was admitting I was crazy. I was validating their story that I was the problem. This is a generous offer," their lawyer said. He had a voice like dry leaves. "It secures her reputation. It keeps this private." Avery closed the folder and pushed it aside. "We are not here to sign resignation papers," she said. "We are here to inspect the minutes." Gordon blinked. "The minutes?" "Yes," Avery said. "As a director, Madeline has a right to review the minutes of all board meetings held during her tenure. We would like to see the records of the votes where she was appointed. We would like to see the attendance logs. And specifically, we would like to see the signed consent forms where she agreed to serve." A silence spread through the room. It was heavy and suffocating. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that seemed to grow louder with every second that ticked by. Gordon looked at Elise. Elise looked at the lawyer. The staff in the hallway seemed to have gone quiet. "We keep excellent records," Gordon said, though his voice had lost a fraction of its boom. "But those are archived. It will take time to retrieve them." "We have time," Avery said. "We will wait." Elise moved then. She reached for a glass of water on the table. Her hand was shaking. It was a subtle tremor, the water rippling in the glass, but the light caught it. She brought the glass to her lips, took a sip, and set it down hard. She began to smooth the fabric of her blazer, over and over. Her palm ran down the lapel, flattening invisible wrinkles. "This is absurd," Elise said. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "You are wasting our time. Madeline, you know you have a temper. You know you forget things. You probably signed those papers 5 years ago and forgot all about it. Just like you forgot to send a thank you note for your graduation gift." I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. For years, I had thought of her as the passive one, the buffer. I thought she went along with Gordon because she was afraid of him, or because she just wanted peace. But watching her now, watching the calculation in her eyes as she tried to gaslight me in front of witnesses, I realized I had been wrong. She wasn't the buffer. She was the strategist. Gordon was the face, the ego, the noise. But Elise was the one who remembered the details. She was the one who knew which emotional buttons to press to make me doubt my own sanity. You know you forget things. I did not forget. Mother, I said. My voice was steady. I was terrified. But the terror felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I anticipated there might be some confusion about the paperwork. I said, so I took the liberty of getting a professional opinion. I slid the envelope across the table. It did not slide as well as the folder had. It stopped halfway. Gordon had to reach for it. What is this? He demanded. That is a report from a forensic document examiner. I said. I had them compare the signature on the foundation's tax filings, the signature that is supposed to be mine, with 10 years of my legal documents, leases, tax returns, checks. Gordon froze. He held the envelope, but he didn't open it. The report concludes that there is a 99% probability that the signature on your filings is a simulation. I said, a forgery. I looked at the lawyer. I never signed those consent forms. I said, I never attended a meeting, and I certainly never authorized the transfer of funds to Sterling Ridge Consulting. The lawyer shifted in his seat. He looked at Gordon, and for the first time, I saw genuine alarm in his eyes. He had thought he was dealing with a family squabble. He realized now he was sitting in the middle of a felony. This is a mistake, Gordon said. He threw the envelope back onto the table. Signatures vary. People change how they write. This proves nothing. It proves enough to open an investigation, Avery said. Gordon stood up. His chair slammed back against the window. You are ungrateful, he shouted. The veneer of the corporate president shattered, revealing the angry, desperate father underneath. We built this for you. We built this legacy so the name Collins would mean something. And you want to tear it down because of… what? Jealousy? Spite? We did it to protect the assets, Elise snapped. She was standing now, too. Her hands were fists on the table. We needed a third director to meet the quorum. We couldn't trust strangers. We used your name because we thought we could trust family. So you admit it, I said. Elise's mouth snapped shut. She realized, too late, that she had just confessed. The room was electric with tension. Then, a small voice spoke from the corner. I told you they would find out. We all turned. Celia Rourke was standing. She looked like she might faint, but her chin was up. She was holding her tablet so tight her knuckles were yellow. Quiet. Celia. Gordon barked. No, Celia said. Her voice cracked, high and thin. I am not going to jail for you. Mr. Collins, I have 2 kids. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. They made me sign them, she said, every quarter. Mrs. Collins would bring me a stack of vendor approvals and the board minutes. She told me to sign your name. She said it was just a formality. She said you were traveling and had authorized it by phone. Celia! Elise shrieked. It was a sound I had never heard her make. It was primal. I was scared. Celia whispered to me, I needed the job. They pay me double the market rate. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't think anyone was actually getting hurt. Avery was writing furiously in her notebook. Thank you. Ms. Rourke, Avery said without looking up. That is very helpful. Gordon looked at Celia with pure hatred. If looks could dismantle a person, Celia would have been dust. Get out, he hissed. You are fired. Get out of my office. Celia didn't wait. She grabbed her purse and ran out of the room, the door banging shut behind her. Gordon turned back to me. He was breathing hard, his face a mottled red. He looked trapped, and a trapped animal is the most dangerous thing in the world. You think you have won? He asked. His voice was low, trembling with rage. You think because you have a lawyer and a disgruntled secretary that you can destroy us? I am not trying to destroy you. Dad, I said, I am trying to clear my name. He laughed. It was a cruel, dry sound. Your name? He said. You have no name without us. We made you, and we can unmake you. He leaned over the table, his eyes locked on mine. If you do not drop this, Madeline, if you do not sign that resignation and walk away today, I will release the history. I felt a cold spike in my chest. What history? I asked. The full history, he said. Not the polite version we tell people. I will tell your employer about the psychiatric hold when you were 12. I will tell them about the incident in the garage. I will release the medical records we have kept sealed for 18 years. The garage, the memory was a black hole in my mind. I had vague flashes, smoke, the smell of gasoline, my father yelling, but nothing concrete. But the threat hit its mark. He was threatening to paint me as mentally incompetent, to drag up a childhood trauma I couldn't even remember to destroy my credibility as an adult. I will tell them you are a danger to yourself, Gordon said, and I have the doctor's notes to prove it. Who do you think Lark and Finch will believe? The unstable woman who sues her own parents? Or the respected philanthropists who tried to save her? I felt the room spinning, the old panic, the childhood conditioning that said, Daddy is always right. Daddy is the law. Surged up my throat. I felt small. I felt like the 12-year-old girl who had been told she was difficult, broken, wrong. I started to shrink back in my chair. Then I saw Avery. She wasn't looking at Gordon. She wasn't looking at the papers. She was looking at me. Her expression was calm, almost bored. She tapped her pen against the table. A steady, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. It broke the spell. I looked at her, and she gave a microscopic nod. It was a reminder. You are not in their house. You are 30 years old. You pay your own rent. I took a deep breath. I let the panic crest and fall. Do it, I said. Gordon blinked. What? Release the records, I said. I stood up. My legs felt like lead. But I stood. Tell them whatever you want. Tell them I am crazy. Tell them I burned down the garage when I was 12. I leaned over the table, matching his posture. Because if you do, you will have to explain why you appointed a mentally unstable woman to the board of your foundation. You will have to explain why you gave a person with a history of psychiatric breaks control over a $3 million budget. I saw the realization hit him. He had boxed himself in. If I was competent, he was a fraud. If I was incompetent, he was negligent. You lose either way. Gordon, I said. I turned to Avery. We are done here. I walked out of the boardroom. I did not look back at my mother. I did not look at the view. I walked down the long hallway, past the silent, staring staff, and I did not stop until the elevator doors closed between us and them. As the elevator descended, my legs finally gave out. I leaned against the back wall, sliding down until I was crouching on the floor. Avery stood over me. She didn't offer a hand. She just watched the numbers count down. You did good, she said. I think I'm going to be sick. I said. That is a normal physiological response to adrenaline withdrawal, she said. Just do not do it on my shoes. We made it to the lobby without incident. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of emotion. I just wanted to go home and sleep for a week. But as we stepped out onto the sidewalk, into the biting wind of the city, my phone rang. I pulled it out of my coat pocket. The screen said, "Unknown caller." I almost ignored it. But after the threat Gordon had just made, I couldn't afford to ignore anything. Hello? Ms. Collins? It was a man's voice, authoritative but out of breath. Yes, this is Deputy Nolan Greer from the Bryan County Sheriff's Office. My stomach dropped. What is wrong? I asked. We had a disturbance call at Briar Self-Storage about 20 minutes ago. He said the perimeter alarm was tripped. The on-site security guard reported a break-in attempt. Is anyone hurt? I asked. I signaled frantically to Avery, who was hailing a cab. No, the guard is fine, the deputy said. But the suspect fled. The guard said he interrupted a man trying to force open a unit. He said the man shouted something about cleaning up the mess. Which unit? I asked, though I already knew. Unit 404, the deputy said. And Ms. Collins? The guard said the guy mentioned your name. He said, "Tell Madeline she is too late." I felt the blood drain from my face. "We are on our way," I said. I hung up and grabbed Avery's arm. "They tried to hit the storage unit." I said, "Someone just tried to break in." "Gordon," Avery said. "He must have texted someone the second we revealed we knew about the forgery." "We have to go," I said. Avery shook her head. "I cannot go. I have a court appearance in an hour. But you go. Take pictures. Do not touch anything without the police there." "And Madeline?" She looked at me, her eyes serious. "Do not engage the suspect if he is still there. This is not a board meeting." I called Tessa. She picked me up on the corner 3 minutes later, screeching to a halt in the bus lane. "Get in," she yelled. I dove into the passenger seat. "Briar County," I said. Fast. We drove like we were fleeing a crime scene. Tessa wove through traffic. Running 2 yellow lights, I stared out the window, my mind racing. Tell Madeline she is too late. It was a message. It was a taunt. It took us 40 minutes to get to Briar. When we pulled up to the gravel road, there was a sheriff's cruiser parked at the gate, lights flashing blue and red against the gray sky. I jumped out of the car before it fully stopped. "Deputy," I called out. A young officer stepped out of the office. He looked bored, holding a clipboard. "You Collins?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Is the unit secure?" "Door is damaged," he said. "Lock was cut." But the perp ran when the guard showed up. "We did a sweep. He is gone." "Can I see it?" I asked. "It is your unit," he said with a shrug. "Just do not mess up any prints if the detectives decide to come out. Though for a storage unit break-in, I doubt they will prioritize it." I ran down the row of orange metal doors. Unit 402, Unit 403, Unit 404. The hasp was mangled. The heavy padlock lay on the ground, sliced through with bolt cutters. The metal of the door was scratched deep, silver gouges in the orange paint. I lifted the rolling door. It rattled loudly, the sound echoing in the alleyway. I stared inside. It was a mess. It looked like a hurricane had touched down inside the 10-by-10 space. Filing cabinets were tipped over. Papers were strewn across the concrete floor. Cardboard boxes had been ripped open, their contents dumped out. It was frantic. It wasn't a careful removal of evidence. It was a smash and grab. I stepped inside, careful where I placed my feet. The shelves along the back wall were half empty. I scanned the labels on the boxes that remained. Receipts, 2018, catering supplies, marketing material. I looked for the box Jonah had told me about, the shadow ledger. I checked the floor. I checked the tipped cabinets. It wasn't there. "Damn it," I whispered. Tessa came up behind me. "Is it gone?" she asked. "The ledger is gone," I said, and the box labeled M. Collins, board. I saw it in the photo Jonah sent me. It was right there. I pointed to an empty spot on the shelf. "They got it," I said. "They got the evidence that proves I was a director in name only. And they got the book that shows where the money went." I kicked a stack of papers. A cloud of dust rose up. "We were too late," I said. My voice broke. "We were too slow." Tessa put a hand on my shoulder. "We still have Celia," she said. "We have her testimony. Celia will recant," I said bitterly. "Gordon will pay her off or threaten her, without the paper. It is just her word against theirs." I leaned against the metal shelving unit. Defeat washing over me. The adrenaline from the boardroom was gone, replaced by a heavy, aching exhaustion. I stared at the spot where the missing box had been. The shelf was metal, dusty and gray. Then I noticed something. The boxes had been packed tight when the thief had yanked the M. Collins box off the shelf. He had done it with violence, behind the shelf. Wedged between the metal back of the unit and the wall, something had fallen. It was a splash of white against the darkness of the gap. I squinted. "What is that?" I whispered. I got down on my knees. The gap was narrow, maybe 2 inches. I reached my hand in. The metal scraped my knuckles. I felt the edge of paper. I pinched it and pulled. It was an envelope. It was old. The paper was yellowed at the edges. It had been crumpled, as if it had been jammed into a box years ago and forgotten, then dislodged when the box was ripped away. I stood up, brushing the dust off the envelope. There was no stamp, just a name written on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. Madeline. But it wasn't my parents' handwriting. It was sharp, angular script. I turned it over. The seal was broken. I pulled out the letter inside. It was a single page, typed on legal stationery. The letterhead was faded. Klein Associates, Marjorie. I whispered. I read the date. September 14th, 2019. 4 years ago. I read the text. Dear Madeline, if you are reading this, I failed to get it to you in person. I have tried to speak to Gordon, but he is past listening. You need to know what they are doing. They are not just using your name for the tax breaks. They are building a liability shield. I found the draft filings for the Sterling Ridge Incorporation. They have listed you as the guarantor for the debt purchases. If the market turns, or if the loans default, the creditors will not come for the foundation. They will come for you. I am resigning today. I cannot be part of this. I wanted to tell you, but Gordon threatened to have me disbarred if I broke privilege. Please, Madeline, check your credit. Check the public records. Get out before the wall falls. Yours, Marjorie Klein. My hands shook. Marjorie hadn't just slipped me a note at the birthday party. She had tried to warn me 4 years ago. And someone, my father, probably, had intercepted the letter and buried it in a box in a storage unit in Bryan County. They knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just embezzling. They were setting me up to take the fall for millions of dollars in bad debt. Tessa was reading over my shoulder. Oh my God, she whispered. You are the guarantor. I looked at the empty shelf. They took the ledger. I said, they took the board minutes. I held up the letter, but they missed the motive. I looked at Tessa. The fear was gone. It was replaced by something cold and hard. Gordon threatened to release the history. I said, he threatened to burn me down. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. He should have checked the shelf. The letter from Marjorie Klein burned in my pocket as I stood on her front porch. It was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the pavement and made the world look like it was dissolving. Marjorie lived in a townhouse in the historic district, a place of brick and ivy that suggested old money and quiet integrity. I knocked on the heavy black door. It opened almost immediately. Marjorie stood there, wrapped in a cashmere cardigan, holding a cup of tea. She looked older than I remembered from the birthday party. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired behind her reading glasses. I found the letter, I said. She didn't look surprised. She just stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in, Madeline, she said. I have been expecting you since the party. Her living room was a library of dark wood and leather. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I sat on the edge of a Chesterfield sofa. Refusing the tea she offered, I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. I pulled the crumpled envelope from my coat and placed it on the coffee table between us. You tried to warn me 4 years ago. I said. Marjorie looked at the envelope. She reached out and touched the corner of it, a gesture that looked almost like an apology. I did. She said, I drafted that letter the day I resigned. I gave it to your father to deliver. He swore to me that he would give it to you. He told me he wanted to come clean, that he needed your help to restructure the debt. He buried it in a storage unit. I said, along with the ledger. Marjorie sighed, a long, rattling sound. I was naive, she said. I thought Gordon was a desperate man who had made mistakes. I didn't realize he was a man who had built a machine to consume his own family. You were outside counsel. I said, you knew about the structure. I set it up, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. I incorporated the Collins Hope Initiative. I wrote the bylaws. At first, It was legitimate. Gordon wanted the social cachet. He wanted to be seen as a pillar of Harbor Glen. But then the investments went bad. What investments? I asked. Real estate, she said. Speculative land deals in Nevada. He leveraged everything. The house, his retirement, your grandmother's estate. When the market dipped, he was underwater. He needed cash flow to service the debt. But he couldn't get a loan. His credit was shot. So he used the charity. I said, he used the donations to pay the interest, Marjorie said. And he used you as the insurance policy. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. That is what I tried to explain in the letter. Madeline, Sterling Ridge Consulting isn't just a shell company for laundering money. It is a debt vehicle. Gordon bought bad debt, his own debt, through Sterling Ridge, using the foundation's money, and he listed you as the personal guarantor for Sterling Ridge. I felt the blood drain from my face. Explain that to me like I am 5 years old. I said, it means that if Sterling Ridge defaults, the creditors don't sue the foundation. Marjorie said, they sue you. Gordon transferred the liability of his bad decisions onto your future. If the house of cards falls, he walks away claiming he was a victim of a rogue board member. You go to bankruptcy court, or prison. I stared at the fireplace, watching the gas flames flicker. It was so much worse than I had imagined. I had thought they just wanted my name for the letterhead. I didn't realize they had strapped a bomb to my chest and were waiting for the right moment to hand me the detonator. Why? I whispered. Why me? Why not a stranger? Because a stranger would ask questions, Marjorie said. And because of the narrative. The narrative, I repeated. The unstable daughter. Marjorie nodded. That brings us to the incident, she said. I looked up. My heart hammered against my ribs. August 12th, 1998. I said, the missing page in the photo album, the day Gordon burned a box in the backyard. What happened? Marjorie? Marjorie took a sip of her tea, her gaze drifting to the window. You were 12, she said. You came home early from summer camp. Your parents weren't expecting you. You walked into the garage. I closed my eyes, trying to force the memory. I saw the garage. I smelled the gasoline. Gordon was meeting with a man. Marjorie said, a loan shark, a man named Salasso who was connected to some very dangerous people. Gordon owed him $50,000. Salasso was threatening him. He had a gun on the table. A gun. I whispered. A flash of silver in the garage light. You saw it, Marjorie said. You screamed. You ran into the house. Hysterical. You called the police. I called the police? You tried to... Marjorie corrected. Gordon caught you. He hung up the phone. He sent Salasso away with a promise of payment. And then... She paused, looking painful. Then he realized he had a problem. She said, you had seen him compromised. You had seen him weak, terrified, and criminal. And you had tried to bring the authorities into his house. So he rewrote it. I said, the realization was cold and sharp like ice water. He told everyone you had a breakdown. Marjorie said, he told the police you were hallucinating. He told the neighbors you had been setting fires in the garage, and he had to restrain you. He took you to a psychiatrist he played golf with and had you sedated. He gaslit me. I said, he gaslit me for 18 years. He needed you to be unreliable. Marjorie said, if you were the crazy one, then nothing you saw mattered. Nothing you said could be trusted. He turned his crime into your illness, and eventually, you believed it. You stopped trusting your own memory. I sat in the silence of the library, feeling the pieces of my life rearrange themselves. I wasn't the difficult child. I wasn't the problem. I was the witness. My entire identity, the shame, the anxiety, the feeling that I was fundamentally broken, was a fabrication. It was a cage my father had built to keep his secrets safe. I stood up. I felt lighter. The crushing weight of their judgment was gone, replaced by a clarity that was almost blinding. Thank you, Marjorie, I said. She stood up too. What are you going to do? She asked. I am going to finish it, I said. Will you use the letter? I am going to use everything, I said. The next morning, Avery Hensley declared war. She filed an emergency injunction in the Superior Court, submitting the forensic handwriting analysis, Celia Rourke's affidavit, and the receipt from the storage unit. The motion requested two things: the immediate removal of my name from all Collins Hope Initiative materials, and a court order for the preservation of all financial records held by the Foundation and its vendors. It was a nuclear option. It made the dispute public record. It froze their ability to move money. "We have them cornered," Avery said. Pacing her office, "Gordon cannot charm his way out of a preservation order. If he shreds one more piece of paper, he goes to jail for contempt." "But cornered animals bite," I said. "Let him bite," Avery said. "We have teeth too." The bite came 3 hours later. I was at my desk at Lark and Finch, reviewing a slide deck, when a courier delivered a package to the reception. It was marked personal and confidential. I opened it. Inside was a USB drive, no note. I plugged it into my laptop. It was a video file. I clicked play. It was footage from my birthday party, but it wasn't the raw footage. It had been edited. The clip started with me grabbing the microphone, my eyes wide, my hair slightly messy from the wind outside. "I won't argue feelings," I shouted in the video. This was staged. Then a jump cut to me, pointing a finger at my father. "You curated the audience for this." Then a cut to me laughing. A clip from earlier in the night, pasted in to make me look manic. Then the climax, where I held the phone up, shouting, "I have never been a director," while my mother looked on with tears streaming down her face. The editing was brutal. It stripped away all the context. Gordon's speech, the humiliation, the calmness I had fought to maintain. It left only a woman screaming at her crying parents. It looked like a breakdown. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Madeline, come to my office," he said. "Now." I pulled the drive and walked down the hall. Every head seemed to turn as I passed. Had they seen it? Had it been sent to the whole company? Marcus was sitting at his desk. He looked grim. "We received a package," he said. "The board received one too." I placed the USB drive on his desk. "I assume it is a video of my birthday." I said, "Highly edited to make me look unstable." Marcus nodded. "It is damaging." "Madeline," he said, "the board is concerned about our image. We represent Fortune 500 clients. We cannot have a senior strategist who is becoming a viral liability." He leaned back, looking tired. "I fought for you," he said, "but they are adamant. They want you gone." I stood straight, my hands clasped behind my back. "So I am fired?" I asked. Marcus sighed. "I convinced them to give you a choice," he said. "You can take a leave of absence. Step back quietly. Deal with your family issues. We will issue a statement saying you are taking time for health reasons." "And the alternative?" I asked. "The alternative is you address it," Marcus said, "publicly, if you can prove this is a smear campaign, if you can control the narrative. You can stay, but if you make it a circus, you are out." I looked at the USB drive. Health reasons. That was the trap. If I took the leave. I validated Gordon's story. I became the sick daughter again. "I am not taking a leave," I said. Marcus looked surprised. "Then what are you going to do?" "I am going to issue a statement," I said. "Not about my feelings, not about my family drama, about identity theft." I walked back to my desk. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I opened a blank document. I wrote 3 paragraphs. "To our clients and partners. Recently, edited footage of a private family event has been circulated with the intent to misrepresent my character and professional conduct. This footage is part of an ongoing legal effort to silence my investigation into the unauthorized use of my identity and credit by the Collins Hope Initiative. I have filed a motion in Superior Court regarding the fraudulent use of my signature on financial documents and the misappropriation of charitable funds. This is not a matter of family conflict. It is a matter of corporate governance and fraud. I stand by my record of integrity at Lark and Finch, and I will not be intimidated by attempts to weaponize my reputation against the truth. I hit send. I sent it to Marcus. I sent it to the board. I sent it to the company internal newsletter. Then I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. Yes. But I didn't look crazy. I looked like a woman who was done protecting liars. That evening, I met Jonah Pike at the waterfront. The wind was whipping off the harbor, cold and salty. He was leaning against the railing, looking out at the dark water. I saw the injunction. He said without turning around, "It is all over the local news blogs. Charity board war." It had to be done, I said. Jonah turned. He looked rougher than before. "I found out who owns Sterling Ridge," he said. "I thought we knew." I said, "It is a shell. The registered agent is a shell," Jonah said. "But the operator? The guy who actually moves the paper? It is a guy named Darren Holtz." The name sounded familiar. "Uncle Darren," I whispered. "He wasn't my real uncle. He was my father's college roommate. A loud, boisterous man who used to come to barbecues and give me $20 bills. He runs a financial recovery service now." Jonah said, "That is the polite term. He buys distressed debt from nonprofits and squeezes the debtors. He and Gordon cooked this up years ago. Gordon feeds him the foundation money. Holtz buys the debt, and they split the proceeds on the back end. It was so incestuous. My father wasn't just a criminal. He was unoriginal. He was running a scam with his frat brother." "Jonah," I said, "I need you to go on the record." Jonah stiffened. He looked away. "I can't, Madeline. I signed NDAs. And Holtz? He is not a guy you mess with. He breaks knees. My father threatened to destroy my life today." I said, "He sent a doctored video to my boss. He tried to get me fired. He is relying on everyone being too scared to speak." I stepped closer to him. "You told me you have a daughter," I said. Jonah looked at me, his eyes guarded. "Yeah. Sophie? She is 6. What kind of man do you want her to think you are?" I asked. "Do you want to be the guy who drove the getaway truck? Or the guy who stopped the car?" Jonah looked down at his hands. They were trembling slightly. "I helped them. Madeline," he whispered. "I knew what they were doing. I set up the vendor lists. I carried the boxes. I am not innocent. I know." I said gently, "I am not asking you to be innocent. I am asking you to be honest." He looked out at the water for a long time. The ferry horn blasted in the distance, a mournful, low sound. "If I talk," he said, "I am unhireable in this town." "If you don't talk," I said, "you are owned by them forever." He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. It hung in the cold air like smoke. "Okay," he said, "I will talk to your lawyer." The invitation from Elise came via email the next day. No subject line, just a time and a location. Le Jardin. 1 o'clock. It was her favorite restaurant. A French bistro with white tablecloths and waiters who whispered. It was neutral ground. But it was her ground. Avery advised me not to go. "It is a trap," she said. "Whatever she says, she is recording it." "I know." I said, "But I need to look her in the eye." I arrived at 1 o'clock exactly. Elise was already seated at a corner table, a glass of Chardonnay untouched in front of her. She looked immaculate. Her hair was perfect, her pearls luminous, but her eyes were rimmed with red. "Madeline," she said when I sat down. "Thank you for coming." I didn't order. I folded my hands on the table. "What do you want, Mother?" She reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled back. She flinched, looking hurt. "We want this to stop," she said. Her voice wavered. "It is destroying us. Madeline, your father. He is not sleeping. His heart. Do not talk to me about his heart." I said, "Talk to me about the forged signatures." Elise sighed, dabbing at her eyes with a linen napkin. "We made mistakes," she said. "I admit that. We were under pressure. We were trying to save the house, save our standing. You don't understand what it is like to lose everything. So you decided to make me lose everything instead?" I asked. "You made me the guarantor. Mother, Marjorie told me. You bet my life against your debt." Elise looked down. It was never supposed to get this far. She whispered, "We thought the market would turn. We thought we could pay it back before anyone noticed. We were protecting you." Protecting me? I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. By gaslighting me since I was 12? By making me think I was crazy so I wouldn't tell on Daddy? Elise went pale. She knew I knew about the garage. We can fix this, she said, her voice turning urgent. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. We have liquidated some assets, she said. We can offer you a settlement, $200,000, tax-free. You can move away, start fresh, go to Europe. Just drop the suit, sign the NDA. I looked at the checkbook. It was the same checkbook that had paid for my piano lessons, my college tuition, and the fake vendors. You are trying to buy me, I said. I am trying to help you, she hissed. If this goes to court, Gordon will be ruined. He will go to prison. Do you want to be the daughter who put her father in prison? I looked at her. I saw the fear. But I also saw the calculation. She wasn't sorry for what they did. She was sorry the scheme had failed. The remorse was transactional. I pushed my chair back. I don't want your money. I said, Madeline, please, I have one question. I said, one question, and then I am leaving. She stared at me, her pen hovering over the checkbook. Why did you do it at my birthday? I asked. You could have disowned me in an email. You could have done it at the house. Why did you invite 50 people? Why did you make it a spectacle? Elise went still. The mask of the grieving mother slipped, revealing something colder, something ancient and hard. She looked me in the eye. Because public shame keeps people obedient, she whispered. The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. It was the truest thing she had ever said. It was their philosophy, their weapon, their religion. Shame was the leash. I stood up. Not anymore. I said, I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I stepped onto the sidewalk and took a deep breath of the city air. It smelled of exhaust and rain, but it tasted clean. I pulled out my phone and called Avery. Decline the settlement. I said, she offered money? Avery asked. She offered $200,000. I said, and? And I told her I am not for sale. I hailed a cab. As I sat in the back seat, watching the city blur by, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is reactive. What I felt now was cold and precise. I didn't want revenge. Revenge is about hurting them back. Revenge is about making them feel what I felt. I didn't care about their feelings. I wanted the truth. I wanted the record corrected. I wanted to separate Madeline Collins from the mythology they had built. I wanted to stand in a courtroom, under oath, and say, I am not who they say I am. And for the first time in 30 years, I knew exactly who that was. The Rosebridge Civic Hall was a building designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous structure of gray stone and echoing marble, smelling faintly of floor wax and old judgments. Outside, the sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that hadn't quite broken. But inside, the air was still and sterile. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting flat on the polished wood. To my left, Avery Hensley was arranging her files with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. She didn't look at me. She was in her zone, a place of statutes and precedents where emotions were irrelevant and only evidence mattered. I smoothed the skirt of my navy suit. I had bought it specifically for today. It was sharp, professional, armor-plated. It was the kind of suit a director wore. The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Gordon and Elise Collins arrived not as defendants, but as dignitaries. My father wore a bespoke charcoal suit, a flag pin on his lapel, and an expression of weary nobility. He looked like a statesman who had been dragged into a petty dispute by an ungrateful subordinate. My mother walked half a step behind him, dressed in soft pastels, clutching a handkerchief she didn't need yet. But they weren't alone. Trailing behind them was a phalanx of supporters, 6 or 7 people, mostly friends from their country club, and a few senior volunteers from the foundation. They walked with a sense of righteous indignation, and on every lapel, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, was a silver pin. The Collins Hope Initiative. They had branded themselves. They had turned the courtroom into a stage and brought their own audience. I felt the old urge to shrink, It was a physical sensation, a tightening in my chest, a voice in the back of my head whispering that I was outnumbered, that I was small, that I should apologize and go back to the garage where I belonged. I closed my eyes. I took a breath. I am not 12, I told myself. I am 30. I pay my own rent. I have the receipts. I opened my eyes and looked directly at my father. He caught my gaze and offered a sad, patronizing smile. He nodded, as if forgiving me in advance for the embarrassment I was about to cause myself. He had no idea. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Althea Vance entered the room. She was a woman who looked like she had no patience for theatrics. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked over the rim at the packed room. "This is a hearing regarding the petition for injunctive relief and record preservation in the matter of Collins versus the Collins Hope Initiative," she said. Gordon's new attorney stood up. He was a man named Sterling, an irony I had not missed, with a tan that looked painted on and a voice like oiled velvet. "Your Honor," he said, "we move to dismiss. This entire proceeding is a frivolous vendetta launched by a troubled young woman who has been unfortunately estranged from her family. We have character witnesses prepared to testify to the plaintiff's history of instability." Judge Vance held up a hand. "Save the opening statement, Counselor," she said. "We are here to look at the governance records. Ms. Hensley, you may proceed." Avery stood up. She didn't use velvet. She used steel, Your Honor. She said, "We are not here to discuss family dynamics. We are here to discuss fraud. We are here to discuss the systematic misappropriation of my client's identity to secure financial liability for a shell company." She walked to the projector screen set up in the center of the room. "Exhibit A," Avery said. The screen lit up with two images. On the left was my signature from my driver's license. On the right was the signature from the foundation's tax filing. "The discrepancies are clear," Avery said. "The slant, the pressure points, the loop of the L. We have submitted a forensic analysis from an independent expert confirming that the signature on the right is a simulation." She clicked a button. The screen changed. Exhibit B. Bank records from the Collins Hope Initiative showing monthly transfers of $4,000 to an entity known as Sterling Ridge Consulting. She clicked again. Exhibit C. An affidavit from the Briar Self-Storage Facility, confirming that Unit 404 was rented by a Foundation employee but paid for by Sterling Ridge Consulting, and a second affidavit from Ms. Celia Rourke, former administrator, stating she was instructed by Elise Collins to sign Madeline Collins's name on vendor approvals. The room shifted. You could feel it. The supporters in the back row stopped whispering. The narrative was moving away from the troubled daughter story my father had sold them. Spreadsheets do not have mental breakdowns. Bank transfers do not have teenage tantrums. Gordon's lawyer stood up. "Objection," he said. "Ms. Rourke is a disgruntled employee who was fired for cause. Her testimony is retaliatory. We also have the sworn statement of Mr. Jonah Pike," Avery continued, ignoring him. "Mr. Pike confirms he transported Foundation documents to the storage unit in question, documents that were subsequently removed during a break-in attempt 2 nights ago. A break-in attempt that occurred 1 hour after the defendants were notified of our intent to inspect the records." Judge Vance looked at Gordon. Her expression was unreadable, but she was taking notes. "Mr. Collins," the judge said, "do you have the minutes from the board meetings where the plaintiff was allegedly present?" Gordon stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "Your Honor," he said, his voice rich with practiced sincerity, "we are a small family foundation. We operate informally. We do not always keep strict transcripts of our dinner table conversations. Madeline was always included. She simply chose not to pay attention." "So you have no minutes?" the judge asked. "We have memories," Gordon said. "Memories are not admissible in a governance hearing," the judge said dryly. "Sit down, Mr. Collins." Avery called Elise to the stand. My mother walked to the witness box with the grace of a martyr walking to the stake. She sat down, smoothed her pastel skirt, and looked at me with eyes brimming with tears. "Mrs. Collins," Avery said, You serve as the secretary of the foundation, correct? I do, Elise said softly. I try to help where I can, and part of your role is maintaining the donor lists and the board roster? Yes. Avery picked up a piece of paper from her table. Mrs. Collins, did you ever hire a woman to impersonate your daughter at a fundraising gala? Elise blinked. The tears stopped instantly. Excuse me? She said. Did you hire a woman to stand on stage at the Gala for Hope 3 years ago and pretend to be Madeline Collins? Avery asked. Elise let out a small, breathless laugh. It sounded brittle. That is ridiculous, she said. Why would we do that? We love our daughter. We wanted her there. Avery walked to the projector. Exhibit D, she said. The screen showed the photograph I had found online. The woman in the navy dress, the back of her head, the hair that was styled in a French twist. Please look closely at the hair, Avery said. At the time of this event, Madeline Collins wore her hair in a bob above her shoulders. This woman has hair down to her shoulder blades. Elise stared at the screen. Her hand went to her throat. It must be a trick of the light, she said. Or maybe Madeline was wearing extensions. She went through so many phases. You are under oath. Mrs. Collins, Avery said gently, do you want to state for the record that this woman is your daughter? Elise hesitated. It was a fraction of a second, but in a courtroom, a second is an eternity. Her eyes darted to Gordon. He was staring straight ahead. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He couldn't help her. I don't recall. Elise stammered. It was a chaotic night. There were so many people. You don't recall if the woman standing next to you was your own child? Avery asked. Elise looked at the supporters in the back row. She saw the doubt on their faces. The perfect image of the devoted mother was cracking. I was just trying to make it work, Elise snapped, her voice rising. We had donors waiting. Madeline refused to come. She is always so difficult. We had to do something. A murmur ran through the courtroom. She hadn't said yes, but she hadn't said no. She had justified it. Thank you, Mrs. Collins. Avery said, no further questions. Elise hurried off the stand. Her face flushed. She sat down next to Gordon, but he didn't look at her. He moved his chair an inch away. The judge called for a 15-minute recess. I walked out into the hallway to get water. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer strangeness of seeing my parents dissected in public. Madeline. I turned. Gordon was standing there. His lawyer was nowhere in sight. He had left his supporters in the courtroom. He walked over to me. He looked tired. The stage lights were off, and he looked older. This is getting out of hand, he said. You can stop it. I said, agree to the injunction, resign from the foundation, dissolve Sterling Ridge. He shook his head, a pitying smile playing on his lips. You always were dramatic, he said. Look, Madeline, I am willing to be the bigger man here. The bigger man? I asked. I will withdraw the disowning, he said. I will announce it today. I will say we reconciled. I will say it was a misunderstanding. You can come back to the house for Christmas. We will forget all of this nastiness. I stared at him. He truly believed it. He believed that his love, his presence, his approval was a currency so valuable that I would trade my integrity for it. He thought he could barter with affection. You think I am doing this to get you back? I asked. I know you are hurting, he said, reaching out to touch my shoulder. I stepped back. I am not hurting. Dad, I said, I am litigating. He dropped his hand. His eyes hardened. You are making a mistake, he said. You are going to ruin the family name. And for what? To prove you are right? To prove I am real, I said. I turned and walked back into the courtroom. I was done bargaining for scraps. When the session resumed, the judge looked at me. Ms. Collins, the judge said, as the petitioner, you have the right to make a statement regarding the request for the injunction. I stood up. I didn't need notes, Your Honor, I said. My voice was clear. It filled the high-ceilinged room. For 30 years, my parents have told a story about me. They told it to their friends, to my teachers, to my doctors, and eventually, to me. The story was that I was unstable, that I was difficult, that I was a liability that needed to be managed. I looked at the supporters in the back row. They were listening now. They used that story to justify controlling my life. I continued. They used it to justify signing my name to legal documents because I was too overwhelmed to do it myself. They used it to justify hiding assets because I couldn't be trusted with the truth. I looked at Gordon. He was staring at the table. But the most effective thing they did was use public shame. I said, they knew that if they humiliated me publicly, like they did at my birthday party, I would retreat. I would hide. I would be too embarrassed to ask questions about bank accounts or board minutes. I paused. But I'm not hiding anymore. I am not asking the court to fix my family. I am asking the court to acknowledge that I am a separate legal entity from Gordon and Elise Collins. I am asking for my name back, because it is the only thing I own that they haven't mortgaged. I sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, the heavy doors at the back opened again. A woman walked in. She was wearing a trench coat damp with rain. She carried a leather portfolio. It was Marjorie Klein. Gordon turned around when he saw her. The color drained from his face completely. He looked, for the first time, truly terrified. Marjorie walked to the clerk's desk. "Your Honor," she said, "my name is Marjorie Klein. I am a former officer of the court and former counsel for the Collins Hope Initiative. I was subpoenaed by the plaintiff this morning." She handed a sealed envelope to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. "This is a sworn affidavit regarding the incorporation of Sterling Ridge Consulting," Marjorie said, "and a copy of a letter I attempted to deliver to the plaintiff 4 years ago, a letter that was intercepted and concealed by the defendant." Gordon stood up. "Marjorie, don't," he said. "It was a plea. Sit down. Mr. Collins," the judge barked. Judge Vance opened the envelope. She read the letter. She read the affidavit. Her face grew stern. She looked up at Marjorie. "You are stating that the defendant knowingly listed the plaintiff as a guarantor for high-risk debt without her consent?" the judge asked. "I am," Marjorie said. "He told me that Madeline was the perfect shield because nobody would believe her if she complained. He said scapegoats are useful." The room gasped. It wasn't a theatrical gasp. It was the sound of 50 people realizing they had been dining with a monster. Gordon slumped in his chair. Elise covered her face with her hands. Judge Vance took off her glasses. "I have heard enough," she said. She banged her gavel. "The court grants the emergency injunction in full." She ruled, "The Collins Hope Initiative is hereby ordered to cease all operations using the name or likeness of Madeline Collins. All financial assets of the Foundation and Sterling Ridge Consulting are frozen pending a full forensic audit." She looked at Gordon. "And Mr. Collins? I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for a criminal investigation into fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement." The gavel came down again. Bang. It was over. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Reporters who had been sitting in the back stood up. Rushing toward the aisle, the supporters with the silver pins looked at each other, taking them off and slipping them into their pockets. I stood there, feeling the vibration of the gavel strike in the soles of my feet. I didn't feel triumph. Triumph implies a game. This wasn't a game. It was a demolition. Avery closed her briefcase. "We got everything," she said. "The preservation order, the freeze, the referral to the DA. Thank you." "Avery," I said. Gordon and Elise were arguing with their lawyer. They looked small. They looked like 2 old people who were about to spend the rest of their lives answering questions they couldn't charm their way out of. I didn't go over to them. I didn't say goodbye. I walked down the center aisle. As I reached the doors, I felt a hand on my arm. Madeline? It was Aunt Sarah, my father's younger sister. She had been at the birthday party. She had watched the disowning and said nothing. I stopped. "I didn't know," she whispered. Her eyes were wide. "I really didn't know. Maddie." I looked at her. I believed her. She hadn't known about the money, but she had known about the cruelty. She had watched them treat me like a problem for 30 years and never intervened. "It is okay, Aunt Sarah." I said, "I am so sorry." She said, We should have asked." I looked at the group of relatives standing behind her. They looked ashamed. They wanted absolution. They wanted me to tell them they were still good people. "I am not the one you need to apologize to," I said. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I pushed open the doors and walked out into the lobby. The air was cooler here. I walked out the front doors of the Civic Hall. The storm had finally broken. The rain was coming down in sheets, washing the gray soot off the city. I stood under the awning, watching the water run into the gutters. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lila. "You did it? Mom is freaking out. Everyone is. But I am proud of you." I smiled. A car pulled up to the curb. It was Tessa. She leaned across and opened the passenger door. "Get in." "Loser," she said, grinning. "We are going to get tacos." I looked back at the courthouse one last time. I saw my parents through the glass doors, surrounded by lawyers and questions. They were trapped in the story they had written. I turned away and got into the car. I was broke. I might lose my job. I had just sent my parents to face a criminal investigation, but as Tessa pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic of the real, messy, beautiful world, I realized something. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to We're Here to Disown You. It has been a journey walking in Madeline's shoes as she reclaimed her truth. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of justice and family drama, please subscribe to Revenge Stories and share your thoughts in English. I read every comment and appreciate your support. Until next time.